the notion that if you see something in your community that you want fixed, that you literally want change, it's up to you to do something. And that is how some of the greatest leaders have emerged, whether that is Huey Newton, whether that's Bobby Seale, whether that's Frederica Newton, David Hilliard.
Tell us about your initial reaction when you first came across the article, The Big Cigar, and what drew you to the story.
I literally was on the set of 𝐿𝐴 at the time. It was 12:30 at night. I got an article. It was the Playboy article that Josh Bearman wrote about Huey Newton's escape to Cuba. And I just was blown away. I thought this is something I have never seen. They actually made a fake movie to get him out of the country. And it was very Argo-esque. And I thought, this is a great way to tell a story that not only is compelling, but that it's also entertaining. And so for all the people who do not know what the Black Panthers did, I thought it was a great way to also contextualize a little bit of their history and Huey Newton's arc before his death.
How did you approach the adaptation for this story for television? Like, what elements did you feel were essential to capture like the essence of what he wrote?
I thought it was really important for us as writers to make sure that we understood that we were approaching him at a crux in his life where there were COINTELPRO tactics used to try to bring him down. He was paranoid. He was continuously arrested. The government was after him. The Black Panther Party had been infiltrated by the government. And so him coming to Hollywood was a last resort. It was a way for him to make an escape where nobody would be looking for him as he tried to flee to exile. So I thought it was important not only to tell the caper story, the literal story of getting him from LA to Cuba, but I also thought for all of the people coming up, we needed to contextualize the major beats of Huey's life. And so that started with the formation of the Panthers when him and Bobby Seale made a decision to police the police and carry arms and march the streets in hope that this would deter police violence. And then I wanted to then show how there was a shift in Huey. He was arrested for allegedly a shooting that he didn't do. He was put into solitary confinement for 3 years, which we now know is a form of torture. He got out and he became an icon. There was a Free Huey movement to get him out. They wanted him out. They knew he was unjustly prosecuted, and he was later found not guilty. And so at that point, I wanted to show this is a man who in solitary made a decision that he wanted to help pivot the party from armed struggle to actually the social programs. And so that journey was very important for us to show that the literal act of trying to feed children food before school, literally make them pancakes, was what made him enemy number one to the FBI. And so that pursuit, that relentless pursuit after him, we wanted to show how that made life unbearable and how the party started to have factions break up, different, Eldridge Cleaver wanted to stay with the armed struggle, and Huey wanted to go the way Bobby Seale did with the programs. And that started inner conflict with young people that had joined the Panthers. And then from that kind of show how the FBI was moving in on him. And what did it feel like to actually be a revolutionary who knew that your only way of survival at this point is to get out of the country. And so we wanted to make sure you felt those things. We also wanted you to feel the PTSD that happens from being in solitary confinement. And that PTSD and that pressure of being under constant surveillance with people, the FBI staged fake shootouts in his hallway. They were in an apartment next door to him. He was always being followed. So that threat, after Martin Luther King's assassination, Malcolm X was killed. that threat of taking out political leaders was really real. And so we did show a little bit about how he fell into addiction and how he battled that demon as well, and how he struggled to free himself of that and then get to Cuba. And on top of all of this, a lot of times when you tell stories about figures of his stature, you don't show the human side. And at the time, he was very much in love with Gwen Fontaine, another Panther. She risked her life to help get him to freedom. And we wanted to show, that Black love story as well. And then, of course, the story of the Panthers, Huey, and Hollywood, as represented by Bert Schneider and Steve Blonner.
Amazing. Did you consult any of the Panthers for the story?
Yeah, we actually had it was a very tricky thing. We actually had to rely on the research from the article because Josh had done extensive interviews with about 5 Panthers. So we relied on those interviews. Then we relied on other research. We relied on some writers who had had interviews with other Panthers just to contextualize so that when they saw the piece, they felt like we gave you the feeling of accuracy, although we weren't able to service their whole story. So, ultimately, Frederica Newton, who is Huey's widow, and she is actually, when Gwen Fontaine and him came back, they eventually divorced. Frederica and Huey married, and she now carries the torch of the Dr. Huey P. Newton Foundation. And so when she saw it, to see her moved as somebody who was there during this time was probably the most fulfilling event that has happened on making this production.
What was the process like for casting the role of Huey, and how did you finally land on Andre Holland?
Well, there is no casting process. Andre Holland was the choice. He was the only choice. Yeah, he is probably one of the greatest actors of our time, and we found out was available through our agents. We knew if we could get him to respond to the material, there was no other choice. And so it was really his to have. And we probably would not have made the piece had we not locked in him at this time, because he was clearly the undeniable choice. And when you look at his collaboration with Don Cheadle, who did the first 2 episodes, these 2 men coming together and really excavating that character and building Huey Newton. I mean, you can see the collaboration, and you can see by Andre's tour de force performance that it's just undeniable.
Having Don Cheadle direct, what was that like, and what did he bring to his episodes?
He literally, Don Cheadle is a phenomenal director. He brought a weight and a gravitas to the set. He was very, very honed in and focused on making sure that we always elevated Huey Newton, and that Huey Newton was the central focus of the show. And at no time should Hollywood overshadow or should Bert be equalized to Huey. Huey was the revolutionary, and Huey was the one who every day, with all of these other young Black people, put their bodies on the line to fight for the improvement of Black people in America. And so we looked at Don for that guidance to never kind of equalize, Bert or Steve or Hollywood's input into this time period, because it's different when you're living it and you're of it and it's happening to your people than you writing a check and you're a supporter and you're what we call now a great ally. There's a difference between that. So I think Don really wanted to get underneath Huey's character, and he also knows how to balance tone with drama and with humor from his shows of House of Lies and Black Monday and his own film Miles Ahead. So I think he knew how to deal with the genre, but make you still always understand what was at stake for Huey Newton and the Black Panther Party.
Right. Another interesting part of the show is the portrayal of women within the party. How did you, what did you find out about that during your research, and how did you want to portray it in the show with characters like Teresa Dixon?
Well, yeah, Teresa Dixon's sort of an amalgamation of characters like emblematic of a strong Panther woman, and soldier or lieutenant. We wanted to make sure that the audience understood that the backbone and some of the most powerful and influential leaders within the Black Panther Party were women, and that when Huey was leaving the party, he was actually turning it over to women to run. We did not get a chance, only in one scene did we get a chance to kind of show you Teresa and Gwen Fontaine back in Oakland and what that felt like to try to manage men. But we wanted to give you the feeling that while Huey was escaping and he was fleeing to exile, he was making a decision to hand off the party to, Elaine Brown, to these iconic figures who would go on to make history. In hindsight, I wish we had the time and the space to kind of excavate all of their influence, but through Teresa and Gwen, we were able to kind of show their strength and their influence within the party.
Okay. The Big Cigar obviously involves an impossibly elaborate plan that goes wrong. How did you build the tension and suspense while staying true to the real life events?
Well, I think the caper itself, we needed to be on a spine of the FBI is after, they've put out a warrant for Huey throughout the country. There is a target on his back. So at every moment, he is in hiding as they are planning his escape. So that tension, we had to sort of streamline some of the events. And we had to dramatize and make the events bigger in places. But the caper of getting him out of the country was a focus on, at any minute, the feds could kick down the door. And then, like I said before, we really wanted you to understand just the basics of what Huey and the Panthers were dealing with. And that when he fled into exile, the FBI really rained down harder in Oakland to try to shut down the programs, dehouse people in their housing facilities or in homes, and make life worse as they tried to, quote unquote, smoke Huey out. We wanted to show how they, were after his father. They were, tapping phones. And so that tension, we were constantly toggling back and forth so that you felt like, yes, Huey could be at the movies in disguise for a minute, but back in Oakland, they are shutting down the programs, and all of the money and resources they have at this point are in jeopardy because they're trying to put people that have been displaced into into some housing. And then we also wanted you to see how the tension affected Bert and his business, that, he was running a successful production company. They had done Easy Rider. They had done 5 Easy Pieces. They were in the middle of doing Hearts and Minds, which he would later go on to win an Oscar for. But his whole company was in jeopardy. He was taking money not only from his house, but he was also taking money from his business to help pay for legal support for Huey, to help get the boats, to secure the boats to get him out of the country, to secure different ways to, send money back to Oakland. So we wanted that tension real. And he was also just dealing with harboring a fugitive put his father's career and his brother's career, as well as his other partners' careers, in jeopardy. So that tension was a tricky dance, but I think we did a great job kind of going back and forth between it.
Okay, great. People's differences in politics can result in a lot of different actions. I mean, we see that in protesting today. What did you want to depict about the impact of the Black Panther Party?
I think that I wanted to show, and I think all of us, myself, Jim Hecht, Josh Bearman, and all of the writers that participated in this, we wanted to show you that the Black Panther Party was made up of young people who saw something within their community that they actually wanted to change. The notion of using the Second Amendment, using California statutes, flipping it on its head, and policing the police with guns was done solely to stop police violence against Black people. That is what it was. Too many people were dying in the streets. Too many people were hurting throughout the country. So these kids, Huey and Bobby Seale, had a small idea that took off and changed things. And their act of, Huey wasn't there. We put him on the state capitol. It was actually Bobby Seale, Little Bobby, and other Panthers. But the act of going on the state capitol armed made the Republicans for the first time believe in gun control, because they were like, uh-oh, there are Black people holding guns. We cannot have this. But the notion that if you see something in your community that you want fixed, that you literally want change, it's up to you to do something. And that is how some of the greatest leaders have emerged, whether that is Huey Newton, whether that's Bobby Seale, whether that's Frederica Newton, David Hilliard. Any of these people have emerged because they have decided to look at their community and see where the holes in the community are and how do they fix them. And so if anyone can take anything from this limited series, it's that if you see something in your workplace, if you see something in your community, if you see something, you're a doctor or a nurse at a hospital, if you see something in a school system because you're a parent, if you see something in college, wherever you see something where you want change, I think you should look to what Huey Newton did, what continues to be done by Frederica Newton in all of her work in Oakland, that our communities can change, our communities can get better if we actually choose to get involved.
And as a political activist yourself, kind of staying on that track, how has working on the Big Cigar influenced your perspective on the role of art in media and shaping societal change? And do you feel a greater responsibility now to use your platform for advocacy?
I do. I mean, I think I see right now we're in a fight to tell stories about race. There are over 50 measures, I think over 200 that have been put on the dockets, to actually limit what you can learn about Black history, what you can learn about race. There is over half the books, I think, that are getting banned are about race. So I think it's really important for us as filmmakers, creators, as writers, to look at this time when our history is being threatened and do whatever we can to actually make sure that what occurred in the world is documented on television and in films. And so for me, as a writer, as a creative, and as a showrunner, I think it's so valuable because kids are now, the whole world is glued to their phones. You can barely get people to read a book. You can barely figure out what you want to watch on television. So if you're in a situation where you're lucky enough, the way we were, to be able to tell this caper story, but also to sneak in history and actually get it made on a platform as prestigious as Apple's, kids who may not know about the Black Panther Party, who may not know about what Frederica Newton is doing in Oakland at the foundation, they may not know about, the Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Museum in Oakland. They may not know about any of this. If they watch the show, if they watch the digital assets, if we can get anyone to lean in and want to make more work about this and more work that resonates within the Black community and shows the larger community like what we went through to get here, I think it's imperative. Like, I have to do that. And I want to spend my career, championing and writing those stories, because I don't want to look up in 20 years and people do not remember who these people were that put their bodies on the line for change. And so that's why the Huey P. Newton story is so important to me. And again, we scratched the surface. It's up to someone else to take the baton and do the epic 6-year, 6-season piece about all of the people within the movement, and all of the Black Panthers that deserve to have their story told along with Huey's.
And with the finale airing, what can audiences expect without giving too much away? And how do you think the conclusion will resonate with viewers, especially given the current political climate?
Well, I think that you will see that there are people, and Huey embodies that, people who stuck to their convictions. And Huey, fought for his people until the end. And again, I think one of the larger takeaways of the piece is that if you want to see change in any form of your life, you have to be the revolution. You have to be the change maker. And so I think one of the biggest takeaways will be that you can do something. You know, what the Panthers did with the breakfast programs, what Huey and Bobby Seale and everyone fought for with the breakfast programs, it changed the way the federal government, now serves millions of breakfasts to kids across the country. So I think you might feel like you're very small in the world and that you have no voice and you have no say. But I think once Huey is writing, once he is, makes it to where he's trying to get to, you will feel him and you will hear his voice and you will know that you have the baton to make change. He's passed it on to all of us to say something, do something, and become active in our communities.
And finally, after the Big Cigar, what's next for you? Are there any other historical figures or movements that you're interested in exploring through your work?
Right now I have a production company at Warner Brothers called Folding Chair Productions. It's based on Shirley Chisholm's quote, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. So right now, my company, led by Nikita Adams, we are fighting to get more shows done that shine a light on a lot of women and Black people and BIPOC people who fought to make change. So I hope that you'll see more content, in the future coming from myself and from the company. Our sole focus is to continue to shine a light on us, to shine a light on Black people, and to shine a light on these stories that could get forgotten. So we'll see.